tie. It feels weird. I don't see anybody. Is there anybody else in the room with a tie?
But you look good.
I didn't think so.
Take your time. Take your time.
No, I'm not going to start undressing. It's not part of this talk. This thing seems so loud. There we go. You still hear me, right? I haven't moved it too far. Okay. All right, good. A little bit of an echo. Okay. So, yeah, this is what we used to do pre-pandemic. Probably don't remember these.
Still do.
Yeah, still do occasionally. Yeah, some people still do. All right. So I'm going to talk about, as Steve mentioned, the National Spatial Data Infrastructure. Trying to move it from policy to practice, and it's been a concept for and a policy for a long time, 30 years. You know, I'm sort of standing on the shoulders of giants, trying to move this forward. You've got a giant in your midst here, 𝐀𝐫𝐢𝐳𝐶. He's one of the giants whose shoulders I stand on. Probably getting a little uncomfortable by now, but. Yeah, so there were lots of people that tried to move this forward. I happened to be involved as a very young child of 12 in 1992 when this started. But so I was involved from the beginning. But we've got a lot of work still to do to make this something that actually has meaning to people, particularly in local government. So that HDMI thing is down there. That's all right. I'm going to ignore it. So I've got a few points that I want to just sort of summary points that I want to mention before I really talk more directly about the NSDI. And as it says here, data is really the key currency to create resilience. And that's really what, across the board we're trying to do, is to create more resilience, to deal with wicked problems, to deal with all of our problems that we have, whether they're at the local level, regional, national, or whatever. And we need data. We need location data in particular. We need trusted, authoritative, geolocated data to make investment decisions to create resilience. Data from all sectors of society is needed. It's critical to gauge the health of a nation, a state, a community. Data analytics are crucial to improving preparedness and identifying the investments necessary to build sustainable, livable, and resilient communities. I joined this small company called G&H after I left as the State Geospatial Information Officer for Oregon. I had been there for 21 years. I joined this small company because they're in the emergency management sector, and they're really trying to figure out how to make the NSDI a reality for everyone that needs to use it. So that really aligned well with what I had been trying to do in different places for a long time. The challenges to accessing authoritative data, you've got so much data, as it says here, 2.5 quintillion bytes of data produced every day. That's a lot. I mean, as you all, I'm sure, feel, we are awash in data. It's really difficult to figure out how to manage all of that. And it's owned by everyone. There's no one data owner for the data that's needed to assess the environment and make informed judgments. And data exists in many places. The needed data is managed in numerous platforms, systems. Knowing what's authoritative is particularly difficult. Making the data more accessible, I think there's at least these three sort of steps, and not necessarily in sequence, but we need to establish a trusted data environment at every level where there's no wrong door to access the data. We need to establish a systems architecture, an organizing principle to enable the system and the data integration and interoperability, and we need to develop tools to enable trusted users to identify, access, import, use, visualize, etc., information gleaned from the data. So with that, I'm going to jump into a little bit of information and background and context about the NSDI in particular. The NSDI was always intended as a foundation for organizing and connecting all the locational data we need to use and every day to solve problems and conduct our business. in both the public and private sector. It wasn't intended as the solution for everything. It's the foundation. We need more than that, but the foundation has to be useful for everyone. So, as it says here, per the Geospatial Data Act of 2018, how many folks are aware of the Geospatial Data Act of 2018? Yeah, quite a few. Not everybody, though. Lots of folks still don't know about that. Senator Hatch in Utah was the principal co-sponsor behind that. As you probably have heard, he passed away shortly after retiring. He retired to spend more time with his family. That didn't work out for him. So that was very unfortunate. But he was really the key principal sponsor behind the Geospatial Data Act. And the technology, the NSDI is defined in the Geospatial Data Act as the technology, policies, criteria, standards, and employees or personnel necessary to promote geospatial data sharing throughout federal, state, tribal, local governments, the private sector, institutions of higher education, nonprofit organizations. So it is really intended for everyone. And the idea is that the NSDI would ensure that geospatial data from multiple sources, including from all of those institutions and organizations I just mentioned, is available and easily integrated. So the importance of this is just a few quotes about the importance of geospatial data and the NSDI. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I think it's notable that you've got all of these organizations and institutions indicating that geospatial data is really, really important for everything that we're doing. And being able to share it across all of the sectors is really an important thing. It can be transformative for cities and can really help in protecting the most vulnerable from natural hazards. So this is all really about using that shared data to create resilience for all of us. So a little bit of historical context. The NSDI was initiated in 1993 by an executive order. That was President Clinton's executive order. The initial framework data themes, the foundation, was identified in 1994 and included cadastral data, so parcels, and I'll mention that a couple more times throughout this talk. But I think it's worth noting that that's, cadastral data, land ownership parcels, addresses, roads. Those are some key things produced by local governments. So all of you folks what you're doing is really intended to be part of this. 28 years later, is it still 28? It might be 29 now. It is 29. 29 years later, the NSDI still hasn't been completed despite the best efforts of many. So a key reason, I think, for the lack of progress lies with governance issues. As I mentioned earlier, there's so much data out there. It belongs to so many different organizations and people. It's in so many systems. Governing how that data is managed and shared is really difficult. So the governance issues are key, and I'll talk more about that. The Geospatial Data Act is really a start toward, or that was intended to be a start toward resolving some of those issues. So the Geospatial Data Act, and this is the reference for it, House Resolution 302, Public Law 115-254. The purpose was to improve the coordination and use of geospatial data. And it really was not intended to just be about federal agencies. It was to improve coordination and use of geospatial data across the country. The sponsors, as I mentioned, Senator Hatch, Senator Warner. This was a nonpartisan effort. And then on the House side, Representative Westerman. That says Arizona. It should say Arkansas. I'm not going to change it now. And Representative Moulton from Massachusetts. So those were the four principal co-sponsors, and then we had quite a few others. I was able to get the two senators from Oregon as co-sponsors as we moved that forward. And this was supported by most of the geospatial organizations, including the International Association of Assessing Officers and NSGIC and URISA. It was supported by the National Association of Counties and lots of private sector geospatial companies. the key elements of the Geospatial Data Act were, and this is why we still have a problem with governance, it designated the Federal Geographic Data Committee as the lead entity in the executive branch. That's all we were able to do in that act. We couldn't go further. It was, we got this enacted in December of 2018. That was the last month of Senator Hatch's last term. So we really needed to move this forward, and we had spent, I think, from 2015 to 2018 trying to get this in place. So we were not able to do everything that we needed to do, and this was one of the compromises that we made. Let's just codify the existing governance structure, and that basically means it's led by federal agencies. So Federal Geographic Data Committee is the lead entity. It directs the lead entity to coordinate and work in partnership with federal, state, tribal, local governments, private sector, and academia to efficiently and cost-effectively collect, integrate, maintain, disseminate, and preserve geospatial data. That's a really, really important point. It mentions that 4 times in the Geospatial Data Act in different parts of the Act. Unfortunately, the federal agencies have struggled to figure out how to do that, what that really means, what does a partnership mean, and it means something different to different federal agencies. Census Bureau feels like they have great partnerships with local governments, the LUCA program and so on. And they do, but there are lots of other federal agencies that don't have that kind of partnership, and even that partnership could certainly be improved. So, so there's a lot of work to be done with regard to partnerships and that kind of thing. It enabled an advisory committee. I've been on that advisory committee. I'm in the 5th, actually I may be in the 6th year of a 6-year term on that advisory committee now. So I time out next April, and I can't be on it longer than 6 years. You might think that's enough, but there's still a lot of work to do. But that advisory committee advises FGDC on the implementation of the Geospatial Data Act. So that's in the Act. And then it establishes high-level goals for the NSDI, and it requires federal agencies to report on Geospatial Data Act implementation to Congress. And that was a really important part that we wanted to get in there. One of the things that we wanted to do, that we were not able to do, was to direct the federal agencies to report their spending to Congress on geospatial data. Nobody has any idea how much money the federal government and the agencies spend on geospatial data. We've got some ideas, and I'll give you an idea or two here in a minute, but that was the notion, was that we needed to report, we needed the federal agencies to report to Congress on that. The Office of Management and Budget, that would require treating geospatial data as an asset. The Office of Management and Budget came back right at the very end, right as we thought we were going to be able to get this across the finish line, and said, if you do that, we're going to oppose it. We'll testify in committee. It won't happen. So they didn't want to do that because it is a big deal. I mean, treating a particular type of data as an asset when they haven't ever done that before would require a lot of work. Any kind of reporting requires a lot of work by a federal agency. So this would have really raised the stakes, and they didn't want to do that. So, so there's work to be done to improve the Geospatial Data Act, and I'm hoping that we're going to get an opportunity to do that. But that part about partnership is really, really a key aspect. So why it matters? Well, it's been around for a long time. Most of the issues that we deal with are local or regional, not national, and you all know that. But they're part of a system. And I've quoted Daniel Goleman here in his book, Focus. I quote him several times in these next few slides. A system is a cohesive set of lawful, regular patterns. A lot of the issues that we deal with are part of systems. We don't think about it that way, but systems thinking and pattern recognition are integral to what we do. And that's how we solve problems with geospatial data and technology. We're looking for those patterns. That's the whole point of using location data. It allows us to think in a way about systems and allows us to see patterns that we couldn't otherwise see. So we're all trying to help solve wicked problems that impact us at the local and regional level, but that play out as part of a more comprehensive national system. And I'll give you a few examples, but wicked problems are the ones that just cascade beyond the local or even regional level. most of you had some idea about what a wicked problem was, and so maybe I didn't need to define it, but it's helpful to think about it in the same way. So the COVID-19 pandemic is an example of a wicked problem that started local but became national and global. A wicked problem typically becomes wicked because it interacts in a system of other interrelated problems. So the data to solve them is often missing or buried in local databases. It's not necessarily that we don't want to share the data, although there are a few instances like that. There's privacy issues, security issues, and so on. But really, a lot of it is just that it's buried. The real estate crisis in 2008 was another example of a wicked problem where the data was really buried. You may not have recognized it as such, but mortgage data that could have provided an early warning of that crisis was buried in county assessors' offices and in mortgage company databases. Not connected, not part of a larger system that could be accessed to provide a clear picture of the problem and possible mitigating actions that we could have taken. And we still have that problem. I mean, that data is still buried. If we have another, there were some things that were done to try to prevent it from happening again, but that data that we need to see it happening before it begins to cascade is still buried in most cases around the country. Climate resilience is another example of a wicked problem that requires local data to be integrated in a larger context to understand the possible solutions. So we need to make that data part of a national system in order for the solutions and the solution map to become clear. GIS professionals, you folks, are the data curators. You can work with your business partners